Hi, my name is Monique, and my sister Tracy and I have a small fiber business in Pueblo, Colorado called The Felted Dog. So we like to play with wool, so we make lots of wool gifts, felted items, and one of the funnest things we get to do is we get to teach people how to needle felt, because needle felting is one of the funnest and simplest fiber arts that you can pick up, and just about anybody can do it. It doesn't take a lot of technical skill. You don't have to learn intricate patterns and how to count things and stuff. So it's really fun to do. And so I just wanted to really quick go over what is felt and what it would take to become a needle felter. So first, what is felt? Well, the definition of felt is to combine fibers. And so basically the idea is just that fibers have locked together to become a felt fabric. Now, true felt is made with animal fibers, and the reason it's made with animal fibers, particularly wool, and that's what I'm going to talk about mostly today is sheep's wool, is because wool has, on each fiber there are scales that are on the fiber, and it is those scales on each fiber that lock together to create felt. So that's basically what's happening when felt is created. Now, there are a few types of felt that you may be familiar with. One that most people are familiar with is a wet felting. And so that's when they take the wool fibers and lay them together and you agitate them with water and soap. And it's through that agitation process that, of course, those fibers, the scales on the fibers are locking together. So this is an example of some wet felting. I'm not a wet felter. I've always just been a needle felter, but I did make this cool little fox hat in a class, and I got to try. And so I'm going to kind of show you. It makes a really cool strong fiber. So that is wet felting. You see that a lot in scarves and hats and mittens and all kinds of pieces of art. So that's something you're probably most familiar with. Another type of felting, which has a different word actually, is called fulling, F-U-L-L-I-N-G, fulling. That is when you have knit, crocheted, or even woven together yarn, basically, and then shrunk it. So of course this is done again with wool yarn or fibers, and then you shrink it together, and it then makes a really nice strong fabric, much like the wet felting. Now this is a process that my sister does all the time. In fact, this is just one of our little doggy poop bags that you can get, but fulling is another great way that you can get into some felting if you are a crocheter or knitter. But today I want to talk about needle felting. Now, needle felting is not, you're not really making a fabric as much as you're making shapes or you're appliquing, and I'll explain that. But here's a little needle felted narwhal that I made. So needle felting is more of a decorative art. It's not as strong and durable as wet felting and fulling. But this, with needle felting, you get to make fun little things. So this little narwhal guy, here's a moose that I made by just using a cookie cutter to use the shape and then just felting the wool together. You can just make little shapes. You can be whimsical and fun with this. So this is just, you know, basically making some cute little critters. But you can also, there's a process of needle felting called applique, where you're basically just needle felting the fiber straight onto something. And so this is an example of some coasters I made. You can make beautiful art pieces, pictures and things with needle felting. It's not something I've done a lot of. I tend to stick to the critters, but it's a technique that you can do with your needle and your fiber. And so let's get to what I'm talking about when I keep talking about the fiber and the supplies. So the first thing you need, first and foremost, is a felting needle. And so this is a basic felting needle. Hopefully my camera's picking that up. And you might be able to see, if I can get it to, there's little barbs on this. So it's very, very sharp, and there's little barbs on it. And it's those barbs that are on that needle that are catching the scales that are on the fiber. So that's how it's that's how it's working. That's how felting is. So you've got to have felting needles. There are various sizes of felting needles. They all basically look like this. And it's just in the configuration of the shape of the needle and the barbs. It depends on what size it is. So there's some needles that are the higher the number. So they go from something like 36 to 42. The higher the number, the finer the felt. So like if you're doing really fine details, or the lower the number, the coarser the needle, and that means it's pushing more wool. And so that's when you're just kind of putting a project together. And then there's triangles and stars, and again, that's kind of in the way the needle is shaped. So I'm not going to get into needle sizes and stuff, but just know there are different ones for different applications. My general all-purpose needle that I use and put in all my kits is a 38 star. You really can't go wrong with a 38 star. So that's a great one to start with, and then you can kind of get kits with other needles, and you can start to play with them, because really you just have to play with them. And it's needle felting is a lot of just going by feel. And so so that's your basic needle. Now you can buy tools that you put your felting needles in so that you can get, you know, more than one. This tool here actually can hold up to 3, and they're pretty common. You'll see these around. But basically, as you can see, I'm just putting your typical felting needles just right into this tool. So again, your basic felting needles is all you need, and even if you are using tools. So this one holds 3. I always use 2. That's just my preference. They make ones that hold 5 or 6 for more of an applique thing. I'll be honest with you, the 5 needles scare me a little, so I stick with 2. And then you always need to have a work surface. And so this is, you can't just use, like, I've heard people say you can just use styrofoam. Just your classic styrofoam, kind of like that's made up of little balls and stuff. It'll just, you poke it and it'll just start falling apart. So you don't want to use just regular styrofoam. But this is, you start to see this one. I hope you can kind of tell, but this is kind of the more, for lack of a better word, rubbery type packing material. Basically, it kind of depends. But if you, I bought a computer, and this was the packing material, so I cut it up. So you can kind of repurpose stuff that you find in packing material. But this is also the felting pad that you'll see when you buy a felting pad. Like, I sell these. I also sell the needles and the tools and the fiber, so get a hold of me if you want some more. But you'll often see a felting pad like this. They might be dark gray, or now they seem to be blue nowadays. But so you've got to have a needle. You got to have some a pad, work surface, and then you gotta have your fiber, of course. And I wanted to go over, again, I'm kind of just talking about wool today, but you can felt yak, camel, so not every animal fiber, excuse me, but you can actually even felt dog, like the underfur. I've seen on the internet, I've seen where people have made dog shapes out of their dog's fur, which is really awesome. So, I mean, you would think since we're called a felted dog that I would have done that already, but I honestly haven't. So, but I wanted to talk about really quick. So this is a merino wool. This is a roving, and roving means it's all been, you know, this is of course off the sheep. That's all been washed, and this has been combed out, and it's in a nice, nice little string here. You can kind of separate it out. And this is, it's basically put this way for the most part, because this is, you know, how spinners use this. They then take these fibers off and they spin. But for needle felting, we can either pluck it off the end here, or just break us off a hank that we want. I don't use roving very often, but I wanted you to be aware of that it's, you know, when you're at a fiber festival or at a store, that this is good stuff for needle felting. It just takes a little bit longer to felt because it's so combed out and it's so nice and fine. What I like to needle felt with is what we call either batting or fleece. So this is sheep's wool that is all nice and cleaned. You know, it's been combed out to a point, but you can kind of tell it's still all nice and gosh, it's not all combed out and straight and fine. It's still kind of combined together. So when you go to needle felt it, it's already started a little bit for you, because remember, we got to combine those fibers. So it's great for needle felting. It also doesn't show the holes. So when you poke the needles, sometimes the hole will show. And so this is very forgiving. So this particular brand is Harrisville brand fleece. And I wholesale it and sell it if you're interested, but this is great stuff for needle felting. And so I'm going to show you really quick, just basically, you know, I'm gonna start to make a ball. And so I just grabbed off a hanky. You don't ever really want to cut your fiber, because if you just take scissors and cut it, you're gonna blunt those ends, and then they're not going to blend in very well. So there's no need to use, earlier you saw me with the roving, just pull it apart. There's no need to cut it. So I got myself a little piece here. And if I'm going to make a ball, I went ahead and kind of started doing that. And I'm going to see if I can get my camera to go down. All right. And so I've got, I'm not very good at this part, the camera part. So now I've got my needle and my put it on my surface. Now, of course, you want to watch your fingers. So while you don't have to count, and you can kind of listen to what's going on around you. I always joke that I listen to a lot of television. I don't actually watch a lot of television, because you don't want to take your eyes off the process. But the cool thing is too, is you can stop what you're doing and walk away and then come back and nothing's changed. And it's not a lot to put away or to pull out. So it's a pretty easy art to take up. So you see, I'm just felting, poking. That's what needle felting is, just basically poking. But since I'm making a ball, you notice I'm kind of moving this around. I'm poking a little bit, and I'm moving it around, and I'm poking it a little bit. Because if I was just to keep it here and just keep poking straight down, then I would just keep flattening it, and I wouldn't be making a ball. So, and then, you know, obviously the more you poke in an area, the denser it becomes, the tighter the fibers became. So if I wanted to really start to make this side really, really smaller than the other, maybe I wanted to make more of an egg shape, I would really start concentrating on this side. And I think you can kind of see how I was starting to shape that. So that's, you know, it's needle felting's easy. I find it sometimes a little bit difficult to teach, because it's really kind of so easy, and it's hard to explain what you're doing. You just have to try doing it. And so that's basically the basics of needle felting. And so hopefully you will check out some YouTube videos or what. And my alarm just went off. All right, thanks. Bye.